Good morning, afternoon, and good evening, everyone, wherever you're watching from today. I'm honored to welcome you all to RACE's Mental Health Awareness Week event. It is my privilege to serve you as a facilitator for this important gathering today. So, today we're gathered a very special panel of experts who will bring a wealth of experience and insights to the table. We'll be exploring mental health awareness in the workplace, education institutions, and within families, and spending some time looking at the important role each of us can play in promoting mental well-being in their respective fields, be it parents, educators, employees, coaches, mental health professionals. Throughout our conversation, we'll address key questions, share personal experiences, and offer practical strategies and tools for integrating mental health awareness into our communities. I encourage you all to actively engage in the discussion today, share your thoughts, and ask questions. I would like to thank you all for joining us today, and let's just dive into this important conversation. Before we start, I would like to introduce my speakers here. So we have Jocelyn. Jocelyn is a mental health researcher and mental well-being coach at the intersect of science and soul, and the founder of True, an organization committed to supporting executive and team well-being. Jocelyn has been coaching for 10 years and researching mental health throughout her life. Thank you, Jocelyn, for coming.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. And then we have Samir. Samir, a secondary school administrator, a dedicated educator with 7 years of experience serving as a vice principal at the Peel District Board. With a passion for student well-being and mental health advocacy, Samir plays a vital role in fostering a supportive and inclusive learning environment within the school community. Samir, thank you for joining.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. And finally, we have Quinn. Quinn, a certified core active coach and NLP coach practitioner. She's one of the co-founders of Graydon. And it's an organization, right? It's an organization working to revolutionize the way we support, empower, and connect with our next generations so they can thrive at school and at home. Quinn has 15 years of experience in coaching, teacher training, and learning content creation for teachers, students, and parents. I am so honored to have you guys here today. Thank you, Quinn, for joining.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Right, introductions are done. Let's dive right into the questions. I'm going to ask you guys, and please feel free to answer, any of you. Can you share your insight on the role of a coach, or on the role a coach plays when it comes to raising mental health awareness?
This is a really important question, and I think very timely for what we're experiencing right now globally around mental health. And traditionally, I feel like mental health has been really reserved for clinical support. And what we're seeing now is an expansion of how mental health can be supported. And from the perspective of coaches and coaching and the skills and tools that coaches have, I don't know if this was a global conversation, but the theme this year for mental health was compassion connects. And so when we think about coaching, it really is all about compassion and coming from a heart-based place in order to have people's stories, experiences, challenges heard, acknowledged, and really have people be witnessed in their human experiences. And so when I think about specific skills and the role of coaches, it's really to hold space, to raise awareness, to help people shift lenses, because oftentimes current day mental health is really around being stuck somewhere we don't want to be, or in a society that we're struggling with, or with children in the education system. Really about external focus and the influence of social media, and how do we navigate feelings, thoughts, and emotions around the constant data that's coming into individuals' brains. And so coaches really have the opportunity to listen at two different levels, or three different levels, micro and macro, to what their clients or students or people are saying in those conversations. And when I think about the perspective of coaching in the education system more specifically, or with parents, these are the most formative years. And from a mental health perspective, adverse childhood experiences, we have an opportunity to really support kids through navigating adverse childhood experiences, whether it's in the home or in the community or in the school with bullying, etc., in order to mitigate stress and the impact that has on the developing brain.
Yeah. Wow. I absolutely agree. Absolutely.
Mm.
It's a very, I guess, a deep discussion and a very deep conversation we are having today, but it's so needed, right? It's so needed, and this conversation can help so many people on different levels. I absolutely agree with what you're saying there, Jocelyn. And as an educator, Summer, I mean, what are the like most common challenges, or I guess you face when you're observing students in a school setting, I guess, and how would you address them?
Mm-hmm. So it could be a polarizing question, mostly because of all the things that we are a multitude, all of us. So I like to think about, the individual as the ultimate minority. So every child, regardless of, the categories that they're inevitably an individual, and those needs are different than others. Generally speaking, though, I found that lately, I should mention too, I work at Peel Virtual Secondary School. We just started this up last year, so it's even more different than a conventional school because our students are online. Sometimes they're all over the world. What we found was sleep hygiene, which is a concept that I was totally ignorant to last year. My social worker introduced me to it. We're finding sleep hygiene, anxiety in terms of like feelings of anxiety and diagnosed anxiety seem to be quite prevalent. I almost think that we don't really reflect on this generally or talk about it, but the act of learning is inherently an uncomfortable experience. This is taking in new information, consolidating it, and in some cases, unlearning what you thought you knew to make space for new learning. So it's uncomfortable, and navigating those feelings around cognitive friction. It can be difficult, and sometimes does result in anxiety. The last one that I've been seeing lately, and this is more because of, I think it's because of generative AI. But we found in the past about year and a half or 2 years, however long chat's been available for, our students are experiencing cognitive surplus. And I say that, I try to make it as parsimonious as possible, but it means that a lot of the clicking, heavy lifting of learning is being used or is being addressed by using generative AI, which leaves these large swaths of time to do what? Are they working? Are they doing chores at home? Are they navigating or maybe experiencing a new skill or a hobby? But all this extra time that maybe we would have spent, working on an essay and having to take a bus to one library and then back and forth and conversing with our friends over the phone. This happens very quickly over Discord, over AI. So we're finding cognitive surplus, and giving kids like a purpose outside of school is starting to show as more of a phenomenon. I'm not going to say good, bad, or indifferent. In terms of how we address these, for the listeners that may not know, especially in Ontario, we do have formal supports through the education system. This is K to 12. We do have a special education department. We do have what's called a contact program where students can come and connect with a teacher that's outside of their credit granting teachers. Some students have individual education plans, so they're legally entitled to supports and accommodations. And of course, there's social workers. And Jocelyn, I got to say, when you were answering that first question, like the importance of coaches, I can totally empathize with that. And I like the word coach because it doesn't imply judgment. I find that's where our students are struggling with, when you're faced and talking to someone that is literally grading you, there's an obvious power dynamic that can be difficult to navigate. Informal supports, of course, there's awareness raising events, kind of similar to what we're doing right now. There's interested people coming, talking, especially our parents. We do have evening events. And lastly, just encouraging like a supportive disposition among staff, almost like a coach. Because moving forward, I think the role of teachers may be less and less about specific academics, like a checklist, and more about encouraging our students to take purposeful risks. So hopefully that answered the question in a roundabout way.
Yeah, no, interesting. Absolutely. Something I'm learning today as well. Cognitive surplus, a surplus, absolutely. I'm curious to understand here, what happens, I mean, to the mental health, for example, if this is happening, like let's say now and the future, like in the next 5 years, what do you see?
Ooh. Has anyone ever tried to predict 5 years from now, 10 years from now? It almost never goes the way we
I
want.
mean, yeah, I know. I mean,
Time.
yeah, I mean, it's for me, I just feel like we can take it as a good thing or a bad thing. But this heavy, experience that these the younger generation are going through,
I do think the next frontier of, I mean, forget about just learners, but maybe everyone. I think the
yeah,
next frontier will be purpose. I
yeah,
think we are gonna. I think a lot of things are going to be automated. I think what will be valuable moving forward is our creativity, our ability to connect with one another, and to be honest, our purpose.
yeah,
Um, you know, I think a lot of us identify, or sorry, um, describe ourselves relative to our jobs.
yeah,
But
yeah,
if a lot of those jobs are now really don't need us, then
yeah.
what do we do with our time? What is life about? Like these very, very large philosophical questions. I think that'll be the next frontier that we're going to need to take quite seriously, or else it'll
Yeah,
be Wally
yeah,
all over
yeah,
again.
absolutely. So that's good. That's good. That gives me hope, not just as a facilitator sitting here, but more as a parent as well. That is good. Yeah, I agree. I agree. There's more when we can see it from two lenses, right? The positive and the negative, I guess. But if we move forward with a positive attitude, we're hoping we're going to be moving into good change, right? So that's good to know.
Hopefully.
It's good to know.
Uzma,
Absolutely.
if I can jump in, I almost want to marry what's been said
Please.
with
Yeah.
a really amazing metaphor that an educator shared with me when I was going back into the school, and they were sharing how they were using coaching skills, particularly with students, but definitely with staff as well.
Yeah.
And they said if you just think about every single person in a school like they're a volcano, and that
Mm,
there is the potential for an eruption, for a big burst of emotions, for them to feel cognitive surplus or lack sleep hygiene or whatever might be happening for them. What they found was that coaching was like little steam vents all around the volcano, and instead of someone eventually having a big burst of emotions or not feeling well, having these little conversations throughout every single day, whether it's in the hallway, whether it's in the classroom, whether it's with one single educator or a host of them within their school, it gave them the opportunity to talk about and express potentially their purpose or potentially what's going on in their life that's working or not working. And to have that place to do that space to do that was something that that educator in particular was finding to be useful. And I love that mental image. I love thinking about coaching as team events because the more we have, the better we're going to feel. And they don't need to be an hour-long conversation with someone. They can be that like 2-minute interaction, in the hallway, and somebody just asks you a really great question, gets you thinking, gets you feeling alive, and then you walk into the next classroom with that energy.
I
So
agree.
I love everything we're talking about. I think it's so powerful, and I think that it is happening on the ground, and we need more of it because the world will benefit from it.
I agree. Absolutely. And that's so important, the talking and the little kind of small pockets of time that people find and can vent. It's so needed, not just like you mentioned for the children, for the students, for everyone, right? And then what we need on top of that is that listening. We need the active listening. So then that real magic happens then, right? When somebody's listening to another individual who's feeling something. It's so important. So I love that. I think it's, and I like the image that you've pictured in my head for sure. And I'll always remember that. And I think I'll be sharing that with my children personally because it's so important. So yeah, I mean, my next question would be how can we contribute to the mental health awareness as parents, right? I know, there's parents sitting here as well, educators. employees, how can we as coaches as well contribute to this awareness?
I can jump in to
Yeah,
start us
sure,
off
please.
and see what it inspires for the panel. How can we what I've been thinking about as everybody has been talking is our future leaders are growing up with mental health and emotional well-being as a prominent conversation.
Yeah,
Where I feel like we have work to do is with the older generations and parents
yeah,
who did not grow up with this. And so growing up in an era where you were told to tough it out or push your emotions under the water like a beach ball and then it explodes like a volcano, like Quinn was saying. So
yeah,
when I think about coaching and mental health, I feel right now what's imperative is that piece around leadership training and leadership development globally. And so
yeah,
everyone is a leader, whether you're in a community or a society, you're in a school or in a workplace or a parent,
yeah,
we are all leading. And so when we can be coaching leaders to be more curious, and asking those quick, curious questions and getting comfortable being with someone else's uncomfortable emotions, even if we don't feel those ourselves, say depression, anxiety, PTSD, because someone is experiencing that. If we can just sit with them in those emotions and not try and run away or fix it, that is where I feel like we have an opportunity to marry like the youth piece and the future and the adult piece and leadership and where we're going. So I
yeah.
don't know if that answered your question, but I feel like your question inspired me to speak about it from like the youth and the generational perspective.
Absolutely. No, I mean, I love it. I mean, I love what you shared because just sitting and listening is so important. And sometimes you don't have to have a response or a reaction. It's providing that space, right? That safe space. And I think you're right. Now we are moving forward to more of an understanding. We had this thing where boys don't cry, toughen up, and it's all okay. It'll be fine. But it's not. We have to. We have to provide this opportunity and the space, the safe space, I'd like to add, to hold these conversations, to have this time where an individual can express themselves. It's so important. It is so needed. And I think having this conversation, especially this week, and I hope the audience can, join in and listen and ask questions. It's so necessary. I can't emphasize enough. Absolutely. As a parent, right? As a parent or a coach or an educator, how do you integrate mental well-being into your coaching practice or within your classroom environment? And this is for all of you. So I know Jocelyn, Quinn, you guys are coaches, and we've got Summer who's a teacher here. So how do you integrate it?
I have a slightly different response to that based on what
Sure.
Jocelyn said, which is it's not dissimilar, but the question around how do we raise awareness? For me, it's not about doing necessarily something extra, though I do think that having a well-being curriculum, teaching social emotional learning in a more directive way is also beneficial. But even on our coaching courses, so typically I train teachers in coaching skills. My goal is for them to then bring it back to their schools to train others in their organization and to make it part of the culture.
Yeah.
But when I'm doing the course, I'm running a course right now. I have people all over the world, and I'm dropping in these like really, really beautiful, I don't know, like perspectives, thoughts, tips, techniques, tools all around mental health. So yes, we're learning a skill set. Yes, this is about practice and discussion. But the part that I really, really love, and I think that I always try to bring in, are these thoughts of like, we're all one, or um, most of us do struggle. Like I just say these little tiny things that just give us they normalize what we're experiencing, and they give us this feeling that, we're not alone. We're part of a community of people that are drudging through life, understanding that life is about suffering, but also trying to manage what that means and dealing with all the things that come with it. And I don't know, for me, it's just how can we find these little small moments? We make such a big deal about doing big actions, but those little tiny moments add up. And so that's what I try to do on my courses and my workshops. I try to do it when I'm coaching one-to-one. But for me, that space of one-to-one coaching is not a space for me to impart what I think about mental health. It's for me to ask them how they feel. So if anything, when I'm coaching, it would be the opposite of what I'm saying. But when I'm facilitating a course, I feel like I have license to share these little tips of wisdom that are not my own. They're, from books that I've read, and I've got books all around me everywhere. So all of these books, and then to point them in directions that they need.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, absolutely.
I can jump in on that too. When as you're speaking, and you're saying kind of what do we have in common, or like listening as basically a number one strategy. It reminds me, there's a very talented educator named Sonia Rubio. She works at a high school in Brampton, in Ontario. In Ontario, we had social emotional learning was put into the grade 9 math curriculum. So I'll let the let the audience internalize that for a second. So social emotional learning and grade 9 and 10 mathematics. It doesn't make intuitive sense, I think, for maybe people like us. So when I asked her, I said, "So how did you even tackle this?" She got in contact with the drama department and the drama club. What they ended up doing was they created tableaus of what math anxiety feels and looks like. And I got to take a moment just to describe this. It was beautiful. There was a student that had almost like a metronome, very, very low beats per minute. We're talking 60 beats per minute. And the tableau was a child working, studying for a test the next day, and on the phone with a friend. And they're getting frustrated. They can't understand the answer to this question, back and forth, back and forth. And then mom is calling. "Hey, dinner's ready." "Okay, mom, I'm coming. I got to prepare for this test." "Okay, sorry, tell me again. It's not making sense." Then the little sister comes in. "Hey, mom's calling you downstairs." And the tapping is getting faster and faster and faster, to the point where the student just gets up. "Enough. I'm just going to fail. I'm never going to get it. Whatever," and gave up. The follow-up to that then was strategies on how to mitigate that. And it reminded me of the volcano pressure cooker thing that you were talking about, because that's what they were communicating. And it had such an obvious impact, but it also had an unanticipated consequence. The kids in the drama club and the kids in mathematics started to commiserate. They were on the same page, because that feeling, that what I just described about, your heart sinking, it doesn't have to be math, it could be anything. But not knowing what to do, feeling lost, is something that we all experienced in our education. So kind of putting that at the forefront, like, we're at a school and we know this is literally what it feels and looks like for some of us. Mm-hmm. Now, how can we collectively move forward from it? It's like the sense of community it developed, and it was such a beautiful thing. So, I mean, a very talented educator, Sonia Rubio, very, very talented, but that's where my head went right away. And I think that's sometimes how addressing mental health can manifest in schools.
And how we raise awareness. Like, to me, that's raising awareness. It's not making it everything. It's just making it a part of what you're already doing.
Yeah,
that's right.
So integrating it into the daily kind of life at school, which is so important, and then they can practice that. And like you've mentioned, and going back to that volcano today, the volcano it's a hit, right? We avoid that eruption, and that's so important.
Otherwise,
sorry, go on.
Otherwise, schooling is just initiation.
Yeah.
Like, I experienced this much pain when I did chemistry, so you must too. Well, not true in 2024. But anyway, sorry.
It needs to change, and it's changing, right? Which is good. We have Dr. Mohammed here, Dr. Mohammed Mahbub. He's been commenting a lot on, in jumping in, and he's mentioned, I believe, all roles within society, community, teachers, parents, family physicians, social and community workers, they all need to adapt the coaching approach and become a better empathetic listener. I agree. Who agrees? The listening, it's that listening that does it for me. Honestly, sometimes it triggers me, right? I think it's a muscle that we need to really use and practice on a daily basis, because we have people listening, but are they listening? So thank you, Dr. Mohammed, for sharing that. I really appreciate that. We have been talking a lot about the experiences, coming from like an education point of view, from a coaching angle here. What about the challenges? I'd like to address them too. What have you experienced, if any, in raising, or an awareness in mental health within the coaching context, and how did you overcome it? Anyone, please. Jocelyn, feel free to answer that.
The first thing that just came to me, I feel like I want to share and see where it leads
Yeah,
us,
sure.
is like, people will come on our courses and they'll say things like, I feel like there's a course before this course. Because how am I supposed to see someone as having all the answers and capable and whole and really believing in their capacity when I don't see myself like that? And so I really think like the biggest challenge, and when we saw it with Carol Dweck's growth mindset work, where teachers were like faking to have a growth mindset, because it was then like, if they didn't have a growth mindset, how are they supposed to give it to their students?
Yeah.
And so I think the biggest challenge is that many people are suffering from mental health, and they still might have to bring it into their like classroom and raise the awareness, and they may not be willing to share that. They might be dealing with struggles that they want to keep private, and that's fine. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. It just is a reality, and I think it makes it a challenge to manage that. So within a classroom, if the teacher is struggling, the students might feel that, they might experience that. And then what do we do as school leaders? What do we do as fellow teachers to that person? And what do the other students do?
Yeah, that's a really important point you've made. And that, my thoughts went on to parents as well. If parents are struggling on a daily basis, what happens to the children? Do we pretend, do we put this mask, put this mask on every day and pretend that we're all okay? Or do we share our feelings and discuss them with our children and then move out of this, stigma attached to mental health? So it's a really important point you've mentioned, Quinn. Absolutely agree. Would anyone like to jump in?
I can jump in from a parent
Yeah.
perspective and working in the field perspective. I feel like vulnerability is an important piece. And so when we are role modeling, I feel like behavior to the best of our ability that we can in that moment in time, it teaches people to be vulnerable with their thoughts, feelings, emotions as well. Something that came up earlier, and I want to highlight it here, and we can maybe put it in the parking lot for a minute, is the psychological safety around all of this. And Quinn and I have done some training in different mental health organizations where that's been a type of a conversation around psychological safety. So I just want to park that for 1 second, but go back to the vulnerability piece, because if we can be honest with, I'm struggling, it role models behavior. And I think what was really important that Quinn acknowledged was children sense everything.
Yeah.
And everything that we are talking about is really around stress levels. And that is what I wrote my master's on, was stress and its impact on human beings. And so when we think about parents, children, educators, leaders inside of an organization, our stress radiates. And so if we don't have clear boundaries or tools on how to manage and navigate our own stress, we're impacting everybody else around us, or else we're emotionally erupting, the volcano is erupting onto someone else, and that is impacting someone else's mental health and well-being.
Yeah.
So from a parenting perspective, speaking very openly, this is my own experience and how I've chosen to do this work with my children as a coach and as a mental health practitioner, is to really be honest and vulnerable to the level that they can comprehend and I feel that they can understand. So that role models to them, hey, yeah, I'm struggling. That's okay. We all have thoughts, feelings, and emotions that are difficult. And so what are the tools and the resources that I use? Maybe you might use something different. And so I just think that vulnerability piece is really important. And it's a conversation that's happening right now in the world of mental well-being, is storytelling. And then if I bottom line all of this, it's taking us back to our humanity. We all have listening, seeing, hearing, compassion, empathy. We're born with all of these skills that we suppress through how our interactions in life. And it's just a coming back to bringing more consciousness to the innate humanity that we all have.
Wow. Wow. Yeah, Jocelyn, that's you summed that up really well.
Mm. If I can jump in for a quick
Yeah.
second. Well, I mean, I hear that, and I think all of us collectively, again, talk for all of us, we get goosebumps when you're speaking like that. In my world, as an administrator, like I've been a manager for 7 years now. Prior to that, I was a classroom teacher. One of the struggles that if I'm being totally transparent, is I found some success with my staff in using like vernacular, like, we are in the service industry. We are in service of students, right? Their education, their well-being, and all that. We also have a legal mandate, local parentis. We are in place of parents. So my students, like I am their interim parent for 10 months out of the year. Sometimes I spend more time with them than their parents do, or their teachers. What I found very difficult to navigate sometimes is I have one group of people that we are serving that are forced to come to us. Kids must be in school. And then I have this other faction of people that are getting paid to be here. So I sometimes experience a little bit of compassion fatigue, because of course, there are people, like I think everyone on this in this conversation, perhaps the people listening, we're all more or less on the same page. People that we're talking about that may have things to navigate themselves still need to. Differentiating between how much to use psychology with a staff member or a child, I struggle with that, like how hard to push back and forth, because to your point, Jocelyn, we're all human. We all have our own trials and tribulations, priorities, prerogatives, but we are in care of our most vulnerable sector of society, and then there's adults. So I'm just throwing this out there. I don't really have any point to make, but I still struggle with that.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I mean, how do you identify signs of mental health in your students, for example? Because you are spending so much time with them, right?
Yeah. And in my world as a vice principal, if any of you remember your vice principals, that job title can be quite triggering for some. They think, oh, I got sent to the vice principal's office, I'm in trouble, that type of thing. I'm often the second, third, or fourth adult that has become aware of something that they're navigating. So knowing that, I try to tailor my approach to who that individual student is. I feel like the two themes of this conversation are volcanoes and listening. So,
oh God, yeah.
Listening.
And they're linked.
Yeah, that's right. So listening, I mean, again, to reiterate, listening has proven to be the number one strategy, whether I'm speaking to students or families or staff or colleagues. I mean, there's two anecdotes that I think will make sense to everyone listening. In my second year as a teacher, my mom's also a teacher. I had a parent-teacher night, and I said, "Hey, Mom, I'm preparing for this. I got a lot of kids that aren't doing too well. What should I do?" She says, "Well, just listen." Lo and behold, one kid comes in, achieving 85%. Parents were very upset that the student was not getting a 90. The next student had a 51%, and the parents were over the moon that she was passing. So you never know where people are coming from, what's in their head. So I find listening is the number one. And I think, I forgot if it was Quinn or Jocelyn that was saying this, but sometimes listening in and of itself, like no talking, just listening, is compelling enough for some situations and some people. They just needed to get it out. So listening is a big thing. And of course, I do have a legal mandate to maybe include some adults, whether it's for different services, supports, and family, depending on the nature of the situation. So not the most direct answer, but it's amorphous, right?
Absolutely. And it's important. And we have spent some time talking about listening today, and I've actually really enjoyed that. I'm going to ask the coaches here, what strategies or tools, and I'm thinking listening will be popping in here as well. What strategies or tools do you use, or do you think are most impactful when working with your coaches?
Do you want me to start?
Yeah, sure.
Yep, go for it, Quinn.
I'll start, you fill it in. So I think that I'm gonna go back and then I'm gonna go
Mm,
forward. Maybe Joss
sure.
can fill in the forward part, which are the actual skills. It all, for me, it starts with your philosophy, your mindset, how you see the world, how you see people. If you don't do that work first, if you can't hold space for someone else's emotions, if you can't
Mm,
listen and actually listen to what they're saying and then be able to take that and then give a question or say it as you see it, I don't think that you're ready to be able to coach. And so
yeah.
that is the first step for me, is doing your own internal work, developing I don't love the term mindset, but I think the coaching mindset, frame of mind, coaching beliefs, whatever you want to call it, is the starting point. When it comes to listening, for me, you used the term active listening earlier, and I was on the course yesterday talking about how I was like, okay, so I'm about to make fun of active listening, but before I make fun of it, I kind of want to know how you all feel about the term active listening. And somebody was like, oh, I hate it, and then people had all these different views of it. And the thing is that we use it. Active listening is a commonly used term, but for me, it's as a neurodivergent brain, I don't understand it. I'm like, what does it look like? Am I like, my ears are forward, I'm ready to listen? Like, and then what's the opposite? Is it not listening? Is it inactive? So and Joss mentioned this earlier when she said micro and macro listening. I think the question we all need to be asking is like, what are we listening for? What type of listening are we doing? And then how can we harness the listening for in order to create the really great question, the really insightful, say it as you see it or what you're noticing. And as a result, help the coachee go deeper or further or whatever they need to do.
Yeah.
So Joss, I'll let you fill in some of the like other skills that come to you.
I mean, those are a lot of the skills there. So when I think about what everything that you were just saying there, Quinn, it's really, and I want to tie in a few things that we've just talked about in this entire conversation. And so coaching is about connection. So whether it's listening or energy or presence, coaching is about connecting with another human being. And when we think about lack of connection, loneliness, isolation, kids on tablets or phones too much time, there's this false sense of connection. And so coaching really brings it back to human connection. And that really, I feel, supports mental well being when we bring in the tools and the skills, listening at what makes us an active listener, or what makes us able to listen into the micro and the macro, is our presence, our ability to be fully present in the here and the right now with somebody. And I mean, Samira, this is probably really hard for educators because you've got a lot of kids and a lot of moving parts. And when I speak just from a coaching perspective, it's people feel, because we're always multitasking. I think that is where when we were talking about, can't remember what you said about the cognitive capacity that's been made available. So I see it two ways. I see there's this extra cognitive capacity, and I also see it for the older generations, not necessarily the children. Like, this could be the savior for burnout because cognitive capacity was overloaded. And so just from that coaching angle in a more of a one-to-one experience, and then maybe Samiri might have some things to say about in an educational environment. It's really about that connection and creating connection and presence and really being with another person without being on your phone, computer, multitasking, distracted, and using those listening skills and curiosity and going back into just a deep sense of presence with another human being.
Yeah. But how easy is that nowadays, right? We've got Dr. Mohammed said we've been given two ears and one mouth, so the ratio is quite natural, and that's true, right?
That's
That's a
what
that's a
my father used to always say that. Literally, that was like my whole upbringing was like, Quinn.
yeah. I like that. It's a good reminder, and it's true. We have so many distractions now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That would not 100% focus on me. Let's, talk about it in a holistic way. There's parents so busy running around doing 101 things in, a day, and then they have children asking them questions, and then there's all sorts going on in the house. Then you got the school, 20, 30 children in a classroom. work environment is busy. So in every situation, we're so busy.
Mm.
So when do we actually sit down and slow down and listen?
So, I mean, maybe in keeping with that, and I do understand that's a rhetorical comment
Yeah.
you just made, so not to be too pragmatic about it. Um, we noticed that precisely last year when we started this virtual school. 4 periods a day, organized exactly like any other. Sometimes kids turned their cameras on, sometimes they didn't.
Mm.
Very difficult to build any relationship with one adult and 30 learners. So this year, maybe a shameless plug. If you look up Peel Virtual Secondary School, you'll see what it's all about.
No shame.
We now have we now have classes only in the morning until 11:30, and every afternoon, so 2.5 hours every day, our staff are having one-on-one meetings with students online.
Woo!
And yeah, exactly.
That's awesome.
And what it's done is the feedback we're getting from our students is like we got grade 12 students. They've already done 11 or 12 years of public education, and they'll openly say in October, after 6 weeks of school, I have never got to know my teachers that well.
Wow.
Which means they message them. They have access to me. I mean, good morning DMs I get on Microsoft Teams every morning from students.
Wow.
Like, I would have never thought, like when I was in high school, I don't know your experiences, but I didn't know I didn't have access to my principal or vice principal or anything like that. So I think to all our points about multitasking, another unintended consequence is our students have to use their calendars. It's one of those soft skills that we push very hard at the school so that they actually make their appointments in the afternoon.
Mm.
And what it's done is actually a student mentioned this one student, Sam. They said because everything is on their calendar on this black piece of glass, it means right now you have my full attention. I don't have to worry about what future Samir is doing in an hour from now. It's already here. I don't have to hold it. And I thought that was such a positive way to look at what the future might hold for us. Not so much about the distraction. Yes, distraction, but if used in a really contrived way, it might lead us to be more human than we have been in the past, not less.
Wow. That's amazing. That's really, I think we are coming to the end, right, of our conversation, although I'm not happy about it. I would like to extend it and talk further. And I think I mean, when I came into it, and we were talking about this busyness and listening, and I to myself I was thinking, is it going to be more of a heavy conversation leading into the negativity of things? But actually, no, it hasn't been. It's been wonderful because we are moving forward and we are changing, and I think these conversations are so needed, and so important. And I have hope for our younger generation because we have professionals like you on board, and that makes a huge difference to our society. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining today. I really appreciated it. I have one last question for everyone here, all three of you. If you're able to share the one resource for our audience, what would it be? So feel free, Quinn, Samir, Jocelyn. What's that one thing that you'd like to share? Sorry to put you on the spot.
Maybe I'll get mine out of the way quickly. Of the many, we do a lot of what's called professional development or PD. Remember,
Yeah.
PDAs, that's what we're doing. So over the past 15 years, I've done a lot of that. There's a mechanism called restorative practices and restorative justice that we use in education, but particularly, and I think Dr. Siddiqui might get a kick out of this, one of our participants. I was introduced to the SPIKES protocol, the setting, perception, invitation, knowledge, emotion, and summarize. It was a kind of a conversational mechanism that's supposed to be used to disclose traumatic or maybe problematic news to patients. But it really kind of frames how we should go into these conversations to not assume anything. So I would say if you look up, if you just Google Spikes protocol or something, you'll find a beautiful picture. And I found a lot of success using it with my students and my families and my staff.
Thank you for sharing. That's great. Thank you, Samir. Jocelyn, anything that you'd like to share?
Quinn, were you going to say something?
I can go or you
Oh,
can
sorry,
go.
sorry, Quinn. Sorry, I didn't see you there. Sorry.
Don't worry, don't worry.
Yeah.
We're now small on the screen.
Uh-huh.
I think that, like, obviously I believe that educators will benefit no matter what from learning how to coach, that it needs to be one of their forms of help on the spectrum.
Yeah.
Just as I would say restorative justice practices, they fit on the spectrum of how do we help people.
Mm.
There are so many ways to help. So I do think that everyone needs to learn that. And I think that there's a lot of different coaching models and coaching organizations out there. I think that if a person is questioning it and they're like, I think I want to learn coaching skills, but I don't know. My organization, Graydon, has a very quick, it's a 1-hour course. It's free for anyone to download or to get access to. And I think it just gives you the chance to learn some of the very foundational skills. And I think that does involve listening. It involves asking questions. And it also talks about our start with heart model, which I think is really the most poignant thing for when you're having a conversation is how can you architect it so that it starts with the human being and what's important to them, and the logical linear thinking brain comes after, not first, because I think that logical brain can get in our way. And I think that once someone has dipped their toes into coaching, if that feels good, restorative justice and well-being and mindfulness and so many of these practices, I like to think of coaching as either the glue that holds it all together or the pelvic floor that really holds it all up. I think that we need to learn practices that we can apply in lots of different places and situations, so that we're ready for anything, whatever it might be.
Absolutely. Wow. Thank you. Thank you, Quinn, for sharing that. And Jocelyn.
I would like to double tap on Quinn's comment because I kind of knew she was going to say that. I would like to double tap on that. And so I bring those skills into organizations with leaders. And I think as a summary to everything, it's about human development and checking in with ourselves and how we communicate with ourselves first. So can we be compassionate and curious with ourselves before we're in judgment, because judgment and curiosity cannot live at the same time in the brain. And so when we think about leadership and whatever the environment that is, everything that we're talking about around coaching are human skills to be with one another through any time, whether it's a work struggle or a mental health struggle or a relationship struggle. It could be anything, and it's all about culture. So it's not just this thing we're giving. It's greater than a tool from my perspective. It's culture changing. It's society changing. It's life changing. And we need more compassion and curiosity on a global level to really have a positive impact on the mental health that we're experiencing right now.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Guys, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate you being here today. And we've had a lovely, set of audience joining. And thank you, Afaf. Thank you, Dr. Mohammed. It's been a pleasure to have you listening to us today. And I wish we can have more of these conversations. And I hope we will, right? So thank you for your time, guys. And we'll connect soon. Have a good evening, everyone.